Hi everyone, my name is Hani. I'm a newly qualified doctor from London. If you want to hear more about how I work to pay my way through medical school without taking any student loans and managing to get good grades all the while, please do keep watching.
Why I suddenly just decided to be a YouTube fave, but here we are. You're not about to get on this flight, sis. I was interrogated for just under 2 hours.
Okay, so you may or may not have seen, but I actually went viral last week for graduating medical school without having taken any loans or having any student debt. And a lot of people wanted to know why, so that's why I'm making this video. Initially, I actually wanted this channel to be one where I talk about skincare for people of colour, and that is definitely something I will be coming back to. But a lot of people were really interested in how I managed to finish medical school without taking any loans, and also people have asked me to make other videos on like medicine and medical school, so I think I'm definitely going to explore some of that, but I will be also getting back to kind of my skincare videos as well. The first things I want to clarify is no, I did not take any student loans for the entirety of the time I was at medical school. For reference, I went to medical school in London in the UK. I don't have a rich family. This was done kind of by myself. Nobody paid for it, I paid for it. And I just wanted to show how I did it because it actually wasn't that taxing, and I feel like a lot of people could do it if they wanted to. Saying that, I do want to clarify, I'm from the UK. And so this is going to be like a very UK centric video. I'm not sure how expensive medical school is in other parts of the world, but I know in America it can be very, very pricey. In the UK, our fees are fixed at £9,250 a year. For myself, it was even £9,000 because I started the year before. I think they increased the extra £250 a year. So I really just want to clarify now that I know this isn't going to be feasible for everyone based on where you are. But I think what I'm going to share in this video will be applicable to people in the UK massively, but also I think people from other parts of the world as well can still benefit from some of the tips. So I guess the obvious first question is why I decided to do this. I agree. It definitely was not something that my peers or friends were doing. Not to kind of get into a separate sad story, but my dad really sadly passed away really unexpectedly just before I started medical school, and that kind of put my family's finances in a tailspin. So I just thought, I don't want to go to university if it means that my family is going to struggle even more financially. I know a lot of people's parents like send them money and stuff while they're at university because obviously like it's an expensive time, but I just thought it made me feel really, really guilty to think my mum is like obviously now widowed, to have to place a financial burden on her as well. So I think that was the main reason. I also had some religious reasons that I'm not going to get into. But I think even if you have these reasons or not, I think a lot of people can benefit from this, because I know that obviously if you're not from like a rich background, the thought of going to university can seem really burdensome. The other really important thing to note is that when you take out student loans, again, this is like UK centric, the loans start accruing interest from the day you take them. So not from when you're done with the degree, but if you take a loan out in your first year of medical school, the next 5 or 6 years, because medical school is either 5 or 6 years normally, the next 5 or 6 years while you're still at medical school, the interest is still accumulating on the loans you took while you were at medical school. Does that make sense? And so because of that, it means that you can take out sums that aren't that big. So you can just borrow, say, the 9,000 tuition fee loan and end up having to pay, £14,000 or £15,000 per 9,000. To be honest, I hadn't thought too much about that before I began. As I said, obviously, I was just more thinking about my family's finances. But yeah, in hindsight, like, it's something I am so glad that I did. I feel like university is a once in a lifetime experience. So one big thing for me was that I don't want to feel like I am constantly scrimping and saving and like my quality of life is really, really crap because I'm doing this. So that was one of like my exit points. I thought if I feel like I'm like saving every penny, like my mental health and my physical health are going down the drain, like I'm gonna stop doing this. This is not worth it. I'm gonna take the loan out. And I think it's really important. Like, obviously I'm sharing this video, but I just think if your mental health is suffering, if your physical health is suffering, if you feel like you're not able to socialize and be with your friends because you're constantly either at university or working, if you feel like your grades are suffering, please do not do this. Like, this is something that I just think it's only worth doing if you went to university for a degree, not mental health issues, do you know what I mean, caused by this thing that you didn't actually have to do. The next thing I want to share is that I was not the only person doing this. Like, I had a lot of friends who did things like this. So I had, largely they split into two camps. So I had friends who were doing this for religious reasons as well, often the same religious reason, again, I'm not going to get into. And then secondly, there were a lot of people who were graduates. So what I mean by that is they had done a degree before and they had come back to do medicine as a second degree. But the rules in the UK are if you are doing medicine as a second degree, you can either do the graduate program, which is a specific program designed for people who have already got an undergraduate degree. If you're doing that program, you have access to all the loans and all the normal funding that you would have access to if you were doing medicine as a first degree. But also some people as graduates do undergraduate medicine, which is basically, even though you have a degree, you're doing the program that's suited for people who don't have a degree. Does that make sense? And you might wonder, why do people do the undergraduate medicine degree if they've already got a degree, if they're already a graduate? And it's because to get into graduate medicine is extremely competitive. Like, to get into medical school is extremely competitive, full stop. Like in my year, when I applied, it was 1 to 14 for undergraduate medicine. And I think for graduate medicine, it was like 1 in 40 people got a place. So it's extremely competitive anyway, but graduate medicine will have like 30 spaces available, whereas the undergraduate course at my university has about 400. So I'm sure you can understand why a lot of people who are eligible to do graduate medicine, as in they have a degree already, I'm sure you can understand why a lot of them would do the undergraduate course. But the problem is, if you do the undergraduate course, you're not eligible for any of the loans and things that you'd be eligible for on the graduate program. So there's a lot of people on the undergraduate medicine course who are graduates who have to pay the £9,000 every year out of pocket. And so the other group of people I knew who were self-funding their fees were people who were graduates on the undergraduate program. So in total, I probably knew about 20 people who were doing this, which honestly was like a massive comfort. In addition to some of the caveats I said before, I think if people could even do this for like 1 year and have 1 year's less tuition fee loan to pay, I think that would be amazing. So for full disclosure, I had a scholarship in my first year, which was £1,000. I got it for writing an essay. This isn't the main thing I'm going to discuss, but obviously research what scholarships are available. In the UK, we don't have a scholarship culture. Like I know in America, a lot of people go to like university full board, or they get not full board, they get full ride. Or they'll have like a sports scholarship or whatever. We don't really have that in the UK. That's not really a thing. But nonetheless, there are still some scholarships that exist. So absolutely have a look at them. There are some things that are means tested. So they'll look at like your family's income, and there are some scholarships or bursaries and things that you'll be eligible for that way. Absolutely explore all those avenues. In hindsight, I didn't explore those avenues enough. That's definitely something I'd go back and change if I could. But yeah, so for full disclosure, I had my £1,000 scholarship in my first year. And I had a means tested grant from the government that was £3,000 a year. It was extremely common. Like a lot of people had some government grant. Unfortunately, the government has scrapped those. They've converted it to a loan. And so I recognized that that's not going to be an option. I also lived at home for most of my degree, not all of it, but I lived at home. And so I wasn't paying full rent, although I was contributing to the household financially. Like I was giving my mum around, I would say, £250 to £300 a month. Which is probably a bit cheaper than rent in most parts of the UK. But the other thing I will say is I had a very, very toxic relationship with Uber for 3 years, where I literally would Uber everywhere. I've realized in hindsight that it was actually because I was a very, very anxious person after my dad died, and just the thought of like going outside and stuff made it, I don't know, like I just became a bit like agoraphobic. Like I was a bit scared to go outside sometimes, and obviously I had to for union school, for union work. So hindsight is 2020. Like I now understand why I had that behavior. But the reason I mention that is because I spent £11,000 on Uber in 3 years. And so that absolutely, plus the amount I was giving my mum £300 a month, which is about £3,000 a year. So I was spending about £6,000 a year on my financial contribution to the household and on Uber, which I think would be analogous to rent. So even though I didn't live at home, you can assume I was paying rent, if that makes sense. So yeah, so I think this is still applicable to people who don't live at home. Okay, so now let's get into the bit that everyone's interested in. Let's get into how I managed to pay my fees. As a medical student, you're going to be insanely busy. Your timetable generally tends to be a lot more full than people doing other courses. In addition, you've got loads of things to like study and revise all the time. So the absolute main thing that's going to underpin everything I'm saying is work smart, not hard. And I honestly think that has been my secret to like achieving so many things in life, because fundamentally I am an extremely lazy person. I also have ADD, so between those two things I actually don't have the skill set to be someone who's really willing to spend like ages and ages studying or ages and ages working. I think it's really important because that way you actually get to have a social life. Like I had a very good social life and my grades didn't suffer, so I'm going to tell you how. Now In hindsight, I realized there's better ways of making money. One thing that I would advise to you guys is explore like passive income. So things like monetizing your hobbies. I can't say too much more on it because it's not something I did. It's not something I know how to do yet, I'm going to say. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of money to be made on the internet. I haven't cracked it, but hopefully like if you can figure out that would be amazing. But I'm going to tell you what I did. So my thing is I love teaching. If you're applying to medical school or if that's something you're thinking about, chances are you're probably quite academic. So I think teaching and tutoring are the absolute best ways forward in terms of like making up your fees. So the industry rate for tutoring is about £40 an hour in the UK. And I have my own opinions on like if that's fair and like kind of some moral dilemmas about it. But I'm just going to tell you what I did and then hopefully maybe we'll get to that later or maybe we won't. But yeah, so what I would do is I worked for, let's just say £40, because at times I did earn a bit less than that, but at times I did earn a bit more than that. But I would say £40 was probably what it averaged out to. So £40 an hour, and I would tutor for 10 hours a week. Now, when I say 10 hours a week, that's 10 hours of active tutoring. But what you need to realize, and what I didn't realize, was that you actually need to factor in all the time that you spend like traveling to their houses and preparing the lessons and things like that to get your actual hourly rate. And I didn't realize that until very recently. But if you spend an hour going there, an hour teaching and an hour coming back, then really that was £40 for 3 hours, if that makes sense. And you really need to be cognizant of that fact. So one thing I always did was I always made the most of my journeys there and my journeys back. So I'd have, even if it's just like quite passive, just watching a YouTube video on like some medical stuff that I was learning or just reading through some notes, I wouldn't even like tax myself or overly exert myself because I prefer studying in my room, but I just like watch a video, or there's some Twitter accounts I follow that just have like medical facts. I would just like maybe scroll through some of those. That's really important that you make the most of the time that you spend traveling and coming back. And when I tutor, I mean register with a tutoring agency. It's really difficult to find like high volumes of students yourself. So I think it's so important to register with a tutoring agency. There are some higher end ones that charge like insane fees. There are literally tutors who earn like £500-600 an hour. Obviously that's ridiculous. I'm not saying do that, but there are a lot of agencies that will charge maybe like £60 an hour or £50 an hour, and they'll take £20 or £10 and you'll be left with your £40 an hour. And instead of feeling any kind of way about that, honestly that's amazing because they do a lot of the boring stuff like sourcing the students and explaining like how everything works. A lot of that stuff they'll deal with. And you also have like, I guess it's also nice to feel like somewhat protected. Like if anything happens or if a student's inappropriate or if anything weird happens, like I have an agency to email and they'll like look after me and they're responsible for me somewhat. I did also advertise myself on tutoring websites. So there's a website called Tutor Hunt in the UK, and you just put your information up there and people can contact you directly. I guess that's good because you don't have someone like taking a bit of your fee out. But again, you don't have all those extra benefits of like a company having your back, if that makes sense. My earlier years at medical school, so I was at medical school for 5 years. I did an extra master's degree in the middle, so that was 6 years total. And in the earlier years, I was like not that smart about it. And I would do like 2 hours every evening kind of thing, which I absolutely don't recommend. It just breaks up your day too much. It's like super annoying. You'll be like hanging out with your friends and doing stuff and then be like, oh, I have to go. I have tutoring, like, and it was all the time. What I ended up doing, and I would totally recommend this method, is just maybe having one day where you do as much of it as possible. So me, on a Sunday, I would tutor for 8 hours a day. I'd literally be going from house to house to house to house to house. And that was 8 hours. And then I think I did like, on a day where I didn't have much uni, I think on a Wednesday, I would just tutor for 2 hours on a Wednesday. And that ended up being so much better. So let's start with that baseline. So that's our background income. So 10 hours a week at £40 is £400 a week. So already we're off to a very good start. So £400 a week is £1,600 a month, yeah? But that actually wasn't the main way I made my money. So the main way I made my money was during school holidays. One of the really good things about the way the UK schooling system works is when kids have holiday periods, they tend to have big exams after. So when you've got your Christmas holiday, normally they have mock exams immediately after Christmas, or they'll have Easter holiday and the May half term, and then they'll have big, obviously, GCSE exams or A-level exams after that. And that's largely what I tutor, GCSE and A-level. So during the Christmas period, when all the kids are off, your agencies are going to be rammed with work because there's loads of kids who are going to have their mock exams. They want to improve their mock grades, and so there's going to be loads of work. This is when I would make the big sums of money that I would put towards my school fees. The Christmas holiday tends to be about 2 to 3 weeks. Let's even say I worked on 10 of those days. Honestly, sometimes it was a lot more than 10. Sometimes I would only have Christmas Day off. So this is a conservative estimate, but let's say I worked 10 days of the 3-week Christmas holiday period, and the 10 days I worked 5 hours a day, so that's 50 hours. And at £40, so 50 times 40, that's £2,000. So there's £2,000 there. I'd do the same at Easter, so that 3-week period. Again, let's just say I work 10 days. Again, this is a very conservative estimate. That'd be 5 hours a day times 10 again, which is 50 hours times 40, £2,000. I'd do the same during the May half term. And the May half term would actually be the most lucrative because the GCSE exams are immediately after the May half term. So there's no shortage of work then. The only thing is, and this is why it's so important to be super good at like managing your time and studying effectively. The only thing is that obviously you have your exams as well some of these times. So after Christmas, so when the kids had their mock exams in January, we'd also have like an exam in January, but that wasn't the main exam. And then May half term, this was really annoying. May half term, which is the best time of the year for me to make money, we'd have our exams immediately after that as well. But honestly, I just became really good at revising really efficiently. So I am the kind of person who I'll revise for 3 hours a day, whereas a lot of my peers are revising for like 8 or 10, but like I'm revising for the whole 3 hours. I'm literally not glancing up, I'm only studying. And do you know what? Let me actually show you the main way I do that. So I actually want to show you the main way I study in a really focused way because I'm a very distracted, unfocused person, and it's actually this amazing thing. I actually bought this because I had some dental issues from eating too much sugar. So this is a lock box where you put things in here and you put the lid on, and you press this button and it'll lock it for a certain amount of time. So as you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but I've accidentally already set a timer on it. So that's why these little prongs are out. Let's just say this pen, obviously not, but let's just say this pen was really distracting. You put it in the box, you put this lid on, and then it's not closing now because I've accidentally already activated it. And then you press the button and it literally locks it for an amount of time that you'll tell it. So you can tell it 3 hours, 5 hours, 7 hours, 3 days, whatever it is. So I obviously initially bought this to actually put chocolate in here. But yeah, it ended up being amazing for my studies. I will link it below. This got me a medical degree, I can honestly say that. So to be honest, I'm really bad at saving, ironically. So honestly, I could have done this without working May half term or even like Easter, because I was so bad at saving that actually I had probably made the £9,000 I needed long before May, April, Easter time. But because I was bad at saving, like things like this became necessary. And also just to fund holidays and stuff like that. Tutoring is very seasonal, so you need a summer side hustle. That's also really important. So as soon as people's exams are done, in the UK, everyone's exams are done by like May, early June. So after that, there's kind of no work up until September, October again. And so you need your summer side hustle. What is it that people would pay for in the summer? And for me, I had to think about in an academic sense, because I've only got like, being academic is literally the only string to my bow. I don't have any other skills. And so the obvious next step then for me was to teach the entrance exams to medical and dental school, because people tend to study for those in the summer. And so those exams are called the UCAT and the BMAT. And I had good scores in both of them. I know in the UK CAT I got 822.5, which was a really good score. And so I emailed some UK CAT companies and I told them my score. I was like, can I work for you? After like interviews and things, I got hired. I've worked at a few of the main ones, and in general they pay around £300 a weekend. The courses tend to be around a weekend long. So I travelled to literally all different parts of the UK, teach the UK CAT for a weekend, and I did that as many weekends as I could in summer. So apart from when I was travelling, I would literally be teaching every single weekend. So £300 a weekend, let's say 8 weekends, because summer holidays at university tend to be very long. So that would be £300 times 8, so £2,400. So you can see how already like that £9,000 or the 9,250 or whatever it is, it's very like surmountable. It's not an insane amount. So yeah, like I didn't actually struggle too much with this, and that's why I was able to, you know, have my toxic relationship with Uber. Like that's why I was able to travel with my friends so frequently, because this amount was actually not an insane amount to save. The other thing is, because I'm terrible at saving. I would literally immediately bank transfer whatever I got paid to my mum. And I think that's so key. Like, till now, I've got insanely bad saving habits. Like, I'm the kind of person, if there's 79p in my account, I'll buy a 79p chocolate bar. So with the bigger picture in mind, I just knew I couldn't be trusted with that money. So I'd send it to my mum immediately. With that background of kind of £2,000 at Christmas, £2,000 at Easter, £2,000 May half term, that's £6,000. There are also half terms dotted around here and there, but I'm not going to include those. Also, the UK CAT course, the things I would teach in the summer, that would be about 2,400. So we're already on £8,400, and that's not even including the £1,600 that we're earning every month, just tutoring as a baseline. So I hope that kind of makes it clear how I paid my tuition fees. Again, like, this is UK privilege. I know that in America, this isn't the case at all. Even if it's something that you could do for 1 year, or if someone could decrease part of their loan or take less, or if I've just given you tips on like working and being a student in general, because it's totally possible. And you know, student loans are killing my people. I recognize that a lot of what I was doing like sustains these cycles of inequality where people from a certain background can benefit from like expensive tutoring and expensive UK CAT courses. So I'm not saying this is something everyone has to do, but personally I would always endeavor to make space for people who are from like my kind of background as well. So I tutored one kid for free, or like a very, very low rate, like £10 an hour every week for the whole time I was tutoring. And I also ran UK CAT courses in the summer. I would do 2 or 3 every year at £60 a course, rather than the courses are normally about £300, just so that people from like my kind of background could benefit. Obviously that's not enough, but I think this is an institutional problem. It's not an individual one. So like, I tried to play my part, but I also recognize that the problem is bigger than me. It needs to be addressed at like a national governmental level. So courses are an amazing way to generate income. And if there's anything that you can run a course for, absolutely, this is something you should be doing. So if you can get 10 kids to pay you £10 for an A-level chemistry or a GCSE chemistry lesson, for example, £10 is actually a very low price to pay for a GCSE or an A-level lesson. If you get 10 kids and you're charging them £10 an hour, then you've made £100 for that hour's work. So if there's anything that you can run a course or a program for, that's an amazing way of working smart and not hard. So for example, and I'm keeping this very academic because that's where my skills lie. If you're like, I don't know, good at playing football or soccer, if Americans are watching, if you charge the kids £5 to come, you coach them in football for an hour, £5, if you could even get 20 kids, that's £100 for an hour's work. Does that make sense? So if you can also take the volume approach, that's a really amazing way of making money. And when I ran my summer courses, that's obviously a way that I'd make money when I ran my own courses. And it really works out because it's cheap for the person, like £5 an hour, or £60 for the weekend instead of 300, 330 in fact. And for you, obviously, my courses would be 8 people, so 60 times 8 is £480 for 2 days work, which is amazing. So I hope that you can see how actually like it wasn't that difficult, like it was fine. And that's why like my grades didn't suffer, and that's why I was able to like have an active social life and go on holiday and do all these really cool things. The other thing I want to say is I paid for all the holidays myself, with the exception of my trip to Turkey. I can't remember why. I think it was my birthday. My mum just said she'll pay for that one, which was very kind of her. Thank you, Mum. I hope this video is helpful. And again, this isn't something you have to do, but it's just something to bear in mind. And I could have worked a lot less had I actually been like vaguely good at saving, didn't use Uber, I would honestly have breakfast for like £40. Like, I was so bad with money. Like, I think there's something about starting university and seeing big sums in your account for the first time ever that makes you go a bit crazy. I absolutely was guilty of it. But even me, like, I was able to do this, which is why I have every confidence that most people can do this. I hope you found the video helpful. If you get this far, I would love if you could like the video. It really helps me increase my reach and engagement and stuff like that. I didn't realize how big of a difference it makes, but that would be really helpful. If you could subscribe as well, I would be really, really grateful. And if you leave a comment, I'll do my best to reply. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, leave them below and I'll do my best to answer them. Bye.
Yeah, dirty. How we let it get like this, I don't know.